Welcome to Adriana Stories. I never thought my best friend would steal my life's work and hand it to venture capitalists on a silver platter. I never thought I'd have to become someone I barely recognized just to get what was rightfully mine. But betrayal has a way of changing you, of rewriting your DNA until you're no longer the person you were before the knife went in. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 32 years old. I was once the co-founder of one of the most promising tech startups in Silicon Valley. Now I'm just a guy who sits in coffee shops with a burner laptop, watching the company I built from nothing become a billion-dollar empire without me. It all started 7 years ago when I was still a graduate student at Stanford. I'd been working on an algorithm for predictive analytics, something that could forecast consumer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. It wasn't just another data tool, it was revolutionary. I'd spent countless nights in the computer science building, surviving on instant noodles and caffeine, refining the code until it was perfect. That's when I met Daniel. He was in the MBA program, charismatic, well-connected, the kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. We met at a networking event where I was desperately trying to find someone who understood what I was building. He listened, really listened, and when I finished my pitch, he didn't just nod politely. He asked intelligent questions, challenged my assumptions, and most importantly, he saw the potential. We became inseparable. Daniel dropped out of his MBA program to work with me full-time. We rented a tiny apartment in Palo Alto that doubled as our office. I coded while he worked on business strategy, reaching out to potential investors and clients. We lived on takeout and sleepless nights, fueled by the belief that we were building something that would change the world. For 2 years, it was just the two of us. I remember the exact moment our first client signed on, a small e-commerce company that wanted to reduce cart abandonment. When the payment hit our account, Daniel and I stood in that cramped apartment, staring at the screen, both of us too emotional to speak. We ordered champagne from the corner store and drank it from paper cups, making toast after toast to the future. Then came the Series A funding round. Daniel had been networking relentlessly, and suddenly we had venture capitalists lining up to invest. We raised $5 million from a firm called Apex Capital. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. We moved into a proper office space, hired our first employees, and started scaling the product. That's when things began to change. At first, it was subtle. Daniel started wearing expensive suits. He began taking meetings without me. He'd come back with vague explanations about strategic partnerships and high-level discussions. I told myself it was necessary, that as the technical co-founder, my job was to focus on the product while he handled the business side. But then I noticed the way our early employees started treating me differently. They deferred to Daniel on decisions that had always been mine to make. When I'd try to weigh in on product direction, I'd get polite nods, but no real engagement. Daniel would smile and say, "Don't worry about that, Marcus. Just keep doing what you do best." I should have seen the signs, but I was so focused on perfecting the algorithm, the thing that had started it all, that I didn't notice the foundation crumbling beneath me. The real wake-up call came during our Series B round. We were raising $25 million, and the term sheet included provisions that would dilute both our shares. I reviewed the documents carefully and noticed something odd. The voting rights structure heavily favored Daniel. Under the new terms, he would control 51% of the voting power, despite us having equal equity stakes. I confronted him in his office, the one with the view that had been promised to both of us equally. "What's going on with these voting rights?" I asked, sliding the term sheet across his desk. Daniel didn't look up from his computer. "It's standard practice," he said. "The CEO needs to have decisive control." "But we agreed we'd be co-CEOs," I said, my voice rising. That was the whole point. He finally looked at me, his expression calm. "Marcus, you're an incredible coder, but you're not a CEO. You don't have the experience to make the big decisions this company needs right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. "We built this together," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't just about coding. This is my life's work." Daniel leaned forward, his tone almost sympathetic. "And it's mine too. but sometimes you have to make tough choices for the good of the company. This isn't personal. It was the most personal thing that had ever happened to me. Over the next few months, Daniel systematically marginalized me. He started holding executive meetings when I was out of the office. He restructured the company so that all technical teams reported to a new CTO he'd hired, a guy with impressive credentials but who clearly took his direction. My access to key systems was restricted. Decisions about the product roadmap were made without me. I tried to fight back. I called emergency board meetings. I cited our original partnership agreement. But the board, filled with Daniel's hand-picked investors, just nodded politely and told me to focus on what I do best. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning in October. I arrived at the office to find my keycard no longer worked. Security stopped me at the door. "Mr. Reed, you're not authorized to enter the premises," the guard said, avoiding my eyes. I called Daniel, but he didn't answer. After 20 minutes of standing in the hallway like a ghost, I saw him through the glass doors, laughing with the new CTO. I banged on the glass until he noticed me. He walked over slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he said, keeping his voice low so no one inside could hear. "The board decided it was time for a change. Your access has been revoked." "Because of what?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because I won't let you steal everything I built?" Daniel's expression hardened. "You're being dramatic. This is for the good of the company. You've become unstable. You've been resistant to necessary changes." "Unstable?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Because I care about the product I created?" He didn't answer. He just handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $250,000 and a letter stating that I was being bought out of my 25% equity stake. The valuation they'd used was a fraction of what the company was worth. I stood there, clutching the envelope, watching as Daniel turned his back and walked away. The people I'd hired, the people I'd worked alongside for years, didn't even look at me as I stood there, exiled from my own creation. That night, I sat in my apartment, a place I'd barely spent time in because I'd been so focused on the company, and stared at the walls. The apartment was filled with reminders of our journey, photos from our first office, a framed first paycheck, the business card holder Daniel had given me as a joke when we started. Everything felt like a betrayal. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I did what I knew best. I started digging. First, I reviewed all my emails from the past year. I found dozens of instances where Daniel had misrepresented my position to investors, claiming I was unavailable or not interested in strategic decisions when in fact I'd been deliberately excluded. There were messages where he'd claimed sole credit for features I'd designed and implemented. Then I remembered something crucial: our original partnership agreement. When we'd incorporated, we'd signed a detailed operating agreement that outlined decision-making processes and protections for both founders. I dug through my files and found it. According to the agreement, neither founder could be removed from their operational role without a supermajority vote of the board. And even then, they retained their equity stake. Daniel hadn't just pushed me out. He'd violated our legal agreement, but I needed more. I needed proof that this wasn't just a business dispute, but a calculated effort to steal my work. I reached out to Sarah, our first hire and former head of engineering. She'd been like a sister to me, but after I'd been pushed out, she'd stopped returning my calls. I sent her a simple email. "I know what he did. Do you?" Her response came 3 hours later. "Meet me at the park near your old apartment. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone." The next day, I sat on a bench watching children play, my heart pounding. Sarah arrived 20 minutes late, looking over her shoulder as she approached. "Daniel's been lying to everyone," she said without preamble. "He's been telling investors you were mentally unstable, that you were sabotaging the product." "Why would he say that?" I asked. "Because he needed an excuse to remove you," she said. "But it's worse than that. He's been claiming sole authorship of the core algorithm. He's even filed new patents in his name only." I felt sick. The algorithm was my life's work. I'd spent years developing it. Daniel had helped commercialize it, but he hadn't written a single line of code. Sarah handed me a USB drive. This is everything I could say before they locked me out of the system. Emails, meeting notes, version control history showing your contributions. Why are you doing this? I asked. Because it's wrong, she said simply. And because I'm next. Daniel's already started marginalizing me too. Over the next few weeks, I became a different person. The quiet coder who preferred algorithms to arguments disappeared. I hired a lawyer specializing in tech startup disputes. I reached out to other former employees who'd been pushed out. I spent hours combing through public records, looking for inconsistencies in Daniel's story. I discovered that Daniel had been quietly transferring intellectual property. The original patents were in both our names, but he'd filed new ones that described the same technology with minor tweaks, just enough to claim they were different. He'd also been using company funds to pay for personal expenses, luxury vacations, a new apartment, even his sister's tuition. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Apex Capital, our Series A investors. I reached out to Rebecca Chen, the partner who'd led our investment. I'd always liked her. She'd been one of the few board members who seemed genuinely interested in the technology. We met at a quiet cafe away from the office. I laid out what I'd found, showing her the partnership agreement, the version control logs, the evidence of misappropriated funds. Rebecca listened carefully, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she took a deep breath. I suspected something was off, she said. Daniel has been making decisions that don't align with our investment thesis. He's been prioritizing short-term growth over sustainable technology. Can you help me? I asked. Rebecca shook her head. The board is stacked against you, but there might be another way. She slid a business card across the table. This is a journalist who covers Silicon Valley. She's broken several major stories about founder disputes. If you have solid evidence, she might be interested. I left the cafe feeling both terrified and hopeful. I'd spent my life building things, not tearing them down. But sometimes to rebuild, you have to burn the foundation. The next day, I met with the journalist, Elena Rodriguez. She was sharp, skeptical, and exactly what I needed. I presented everything I'd gathered. The emails, the financial records, the testimony from former employees. This is explosive, she said after reviewing the documents. If what you're saying is true, Daniel has committed multiple felonies, securities fraud, intellectual property theft, possibly even perjury. But will you write it? I asked. Elena leaned forward. I will if you're willing to go on the record. This isn't just about your company. It's about a pattern we're seeing across Silicon Valley. Founders, especially technical ones, getting pushed out by their business partners. I hesitated. Going public would mean my name would be attached to a scandal. It would make it harder to find work in the industry. But staying silent meant letting Daniel get away with stealing my life's work. Yes, I said. I'll go on the record. Elena published her story 3 weeks later. The headline read, "The Silent Co-Founder, How One Entrepreneur Was Erased from His Own Company." The article detailed everything I'd uncovered, with quotes from Sarah and other former employees, financial records, and expert analysis of the intellectual property theft. The fallout was immediate. Apex Capital launched an internal investigation. Several board members publicly distanced themselves from Daniel. Our major clients paused their contracts pending the outcome of the investigation. Daniel went on the offensive. He gave interviews claiming I was a disgruntled ex-employee spreading lies. He released a statement saying I'd been removed for repeated failures to meet technical milestones, and that the company was better off without my toxic influence. But the evidence was overwhelming. Within days, the Securities and Exchange Commission opened an investigation into potential securities fraud. Daniel's new patents were challenged in court. Former employees came forward with their own stories of being pushed out. I expected to feel vindicated, but all I felt was exhausted. The person I'd become, the aggressive, suspicious, constantly fighting version of myself, was someone I barely recognized. I'd won the battle, but I wasn't sure I liked who I'd become in the process. Then came the day that changed everything. I was sitting in my lawyer's office reviewing the latest developments in the legal case when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Marcus? It was Daniel's voice, but it sounded different. Older, more tired. I almost hung up, but something made me stay on the line. I need to talk to you, he said. In person. About what? I asked coldly. Another way to screw me over? No, he said. This is about me screwing myself over. We met at a small coffee shop in Mountain View, the kind of place we used to frequent when we were just starting out. Daniel looked terrible, pale with dark circles under his eyes. The confident swagger was gone. I've been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma, he said without preamble. I stared at him, unsure how to react. This wasn't part of the script. In my mind, Daniel was the villain, the one who deserved to suffer. But seeing him sitting there, clearly terrified, made something inside me shift. When? I finally asked. 2 weeks ago, he said. The doctors say it's treatable, but it's a wake-up call. We sat in silence for a moment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel had spent the past year claiming I was mentally unstable while he was literally dying. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm scared, he admitted. And because I need your help. My help? I laughed bitterly. After everything you've done? Daniel looked down at his hands. I know what I did was wrong. I know there's no excuse. But the company? It's in trouble. Without your algorithm, they've been cutting corners. The product is failing. The investors are pulling out. So let it fail, I said. You made your bed. I'm dying, Marcus, he said, his voice breaking. I don't want to leave this world knowing I destroyed something that could have changed people's lives for the better. I stared at him, searching for signs that this was another manipulation. But for the first time in over a year, Daniel seemed genuinely vulnerable. What do you want from me? I asked. Access to the original codebase, he said. The real one, not the watered-down version they've been using. And your expertise to fix what's broken. Why would I help you? I asked. Because it's not just about me, he said. It's about the thousands of people who rely on our product. It's about the potential we saw when we started this. We sat in silence as I processed what he was asking. Helping Daniel would mean putting aside my anger, my hurt, my desire for revenge. It would mean working with the person who had betrayed me most deeply. But it would also mean saving something that mattered, something that was bigger than both of us. Okay, I said finally, but on my terms. The next few months were among the most challenging of my life. I worked with Daniel to stabilize the company, but I made sure the legal issues were addressed first. The board was restructured. Daniel's voting control was reduced. I was reinstated as CTO with full operational authority. Daniel underwent aggressive treatment for his cancer. There were days when he was too weak to work, and others when the pain was so bad he could barely speak. But he kept his word. He stepped back and let me lead the technical team. It wasn't easy. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. There were moments when I caught myself wondering if this was another manipulation, if Daniel was just playing the long game. But as the weeks passed and he consistently followed through on his commitments, something began to shift. One afternoon, as we were reviewing a critical product update, Daniel looked at me and said, I'm sorry, Marcus, truly. I didn't respond immediately. The words didn't erase what had happened, but they were a start. I know, I said finally. The company recovered. With the original algorithm restored and the technical team refocused, we delivered on the promise we'd made years ago. Our Series C funding round was successful, but this time, the terms protected both founders equally. Daniel's cancer went into remission. It's too early to say if it's gone for good, but the prognosis is good. He stepped back from day-to-day operations but remains on the board. As for me, I'm different. I'm more cautious, more aware of how easily trust can be broken. But I've also learned that people are complicated, that even those who betray us can be capable of redemption. I still have the burner laptop. I keep it as a reminder of the person I became when I was fighting for what was mine. But I don't need it anymore. I've reclaimed my place, not through vengeance, but through integrity. The last time I visited my old apartment, the one where it all began, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, for the understanding that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about getting even, but about finding your way back to who you are. I never thought my best friend would steal my life's work and hand it to venture capitalists on a silver platter. I never thought I'd have to become someone I barely recognized just to get what was rightfully mine. But I also never thought that in the process of fighting for what was mine, I'd find something even more valuable. The understanding that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It can transform you if you let it. And sometimes, the code that was broken can be rewritten. Not to its original state, but to something stronger, something better. Something that accounts for the vulnerabilities that were exploited. That's the most important lesson I've learned. Not every betrayal can be undone. Not every wound heals cleanly. But from the broken pieces, you can build something new. Something real, something true. Something that can't be stolen.